Hey, first and foremost, thank you for joining our program. We are very positive that it will be helpful on your journey. This is the first video or the first lesson in our biology series. We're going to take a look at characteristics of life. Of course, the first thing has to be introduction to biology. So we're going to introduce biology just a bit. Then the main thing is going to be the topic or subtopic characteristics of life. Let's get started. So we start with the learning outcome. So at the end of this lesson, I expect you to be able to understand what the science of biology is all about. I also expect you to be able to name and define all characteristics of life. Finally, I expect you to be able to describe names given to chemical processes that occur within living organisms. So, what is biology? Biology is made of two words, bio and logy. Bio means life, or logy means study. If you read anything that has got logy at the end, it usually has to do with studying something. For example, technology is the study of technical things. So, biology is defined as the study of life. But what is life? For us to understand life, we have to know what characterizes life. What are the characteristics of life? So we're going to take a look at characteristics of living things. These are criteria or qualities that we should check or that we should check when we're about to identify if something is a living thing or not. So the first is, oh, actually, before we start, there's this memory aid here, Mr. Graphic. So Mr. Graphic is used to, it's you can use it to remember the characteristics of life. So the M is in Mr. Graphic means movement, the R means reproduction, the G means growth, the other R means respiration, the E means excretion, the F means feeding, I means irritability, and C means cells. As we are continuing with the lesson, you're going to understand what all these are. But if you want to recall what characteristics of life are, just remember Mr. Graphic. The first one is M in Mr. Graphic, which is for movement or locomotion. So there are two words here, movement or locomotion. So movement is, I'll start first with locomotion. Locomotion is the process by which a living thing changes location. So if a living thing is at point A and it moves to point B, then we say it has performed locomotion. Movement, on the other hand, can be defined the same, and in addition, it can be defined as the process of moving body parts or moving substances from one point to another within a living organism's body. So if you raise your hand, you have made the movement. So that's what movement is defined. So movement and locomotion are kind of synonyms, but movement also has to do with moving body parts or moving substances from one point to another. One can argue that trees are not living things because trees do not move, they don't change location, but they do move substances within their body. So some liquid substances or fluid substances can be moved from one part of a plant to another. So that's movement. So a living thing must be able to do movement and locomotion or locomotion. For example, here, just to illustrate further, this goat, if it moves from where it is to this point, we say it has done locomotion. The process by which allows it to move, which is moving legs forward and backwards, is movement. The other characteristic of life is respiration or breathing. So, respiration is the process by which living things make energy from gases and food they eat. So, as you breathe oxygen inside, and when you eat, what you eat and the oxygen that you have just breathed in, they are going to be involved in a chemical reaction called respiration in the process producing energy, which is going to allow you to do things. On the other hand, breathing can be defined as the process of gaseous exchange with the environment. So for respiration to occur, of course, you need to breathe. So respiration or breathing are nearly one and the same thing, but respiration emphasizes on the chemical process that occur as a result of breathing and as a result of the food we eat. So a living thing must be able to respirate and also to breathe. Another characteristic of living things is growth, which is defined as the permanent increase of an organism in size and mass. So, an organism must be able to grow. To grow is to increase permanently in size and mass. If something has increased in size, like a balloon, then it goes back to its original size, or it decreases in size, then that object hasn't grown. It does not possess growth. So, a living thing must change or increase in size and mass permanently. So the key word here is permanently, because there are some non-living things that might appear to grow, but it's never permanent. But for a living thing, it has to be permanent. Another characteristic is reproduction. So reproduction is defined as the process by which living things produce their offsprings. So reproduction has to do with producing young ones. There are two types of reproduction. The first is called sexual reproduction, which involves two sexes. So in sexual reproduction, opposite sexes have to meet for young ones to be produced. The other type of reproduction is asexual reproduction, which is defined as which only involves one sex. So in asexual reproduction, just one sex, for example, a female can have offsprings without the need of a male. There are some organisms which are asexual, or which practice asexual reproduction. In a situation where there is no male, it's alone, it can have young ones. So a living thing must be able to reproduce. So if we go back to our memory aid, Mr. Graphic, we're from reproduction, which is the second R in Mr. Graphic. So go to the E, which is excretion, which is defined as the removal of toxic waste substances from the body. A living thing must be able to excrete. Excretion is processes like, as we used to say, weeing. Yeah, so you remove substances that are toxic to your body. So when you eat, when you get the nutrients from the substances, what remains, the waste is toxic. It can be harmful to your body. It has to be excreted. It has to be taken out. So a living thing has to excrete. So another process or another characteristic of living thing is feeding or nutrition. Feeding or nutrition. So what's feeding or nutrition? So feeding or nutrition is all about the process by which living things obtain nutrients from the external environment. So it's all about eating here. A living thing must be able to eat or to feed or participate in this process called nutrition, which is obtaining of nutrients. Another characteristic of life is irritability or sensitivity. So, irritability and sensitivity are synonyms. So, irritability or sensitivity is the ability of living things to respond to changes in the environment. A living thing must be able to respond to changes in the environment. If it's hot, for example, as humans, if it's hot, we sweat. So that is responding to a change in the environment. If it's cold, we stop sweating. So that is a response to the change in the environment. Another good example is a sunflower. So it always points where the sun is. So in the morning, it will be facing east. As the sun rises up, it will be facing upwards, following the sun, just like that. That is responding to changes in the environment. A non-living thing doesn't possess this. If it does possess this, of course, you cannot quickly disqualify it. You cannot quickly qualify it to be a living thing. A living thing must possess all characteristics of life. So if it is sensitive to the changes in the environment, you have to also check the other characteristics. Does it move? Does it reproduce? Does it respirate? Just like that. Finally, on Mr. Graphic, The last letter is C, which is for cells. So a living thing must have cells. What are cells? Cells are the smallest functional blocks of living organism. So just like a house is made of blocks which are repeating, so even a living thing has got smaller blocks that makes it, which are called cells. So a living thing must have cells. So these are the characteristics of life. A living thing must have all these characteristics. If you find an object and it lacks one or two of these characteristics, then it's not a living thing. So other than the characteristics of life, the other thing that we're going to take a look at is chemical processes that occur within living organisms. So chemical reactions, living organisms have got chemical reactions that occur inside them. We are done characterizing life, but now we're going inside life to see what happens inside living organisms. So all the chemical reactions occurring inside an organism are collectively called metabolism. So metabolism is the term, the biological term given to all chemical reactions occurring inside an organism. So there are two types of all these processes can be classified into two types. So the first is anabolism. So anabolism is defined as chemical reactions that involves building complex substances from simpler substances. So anabolism involves building something complex from simple things. And catabolism is just the opposite, which refers to the chemical reactions that involve breaking down complex substances into simpler substances. So catabolism is you have got something complex, then you break it into something simpler. So here is an illustration of anabolism and catabolism. So we have these three substances here. If we can join them like this, then we've built something complex from something simple. This is anabolism. The opposite is where we have something complex, then we break it into the simpler components, and this is catabolism. So catabolism, you cut something. That's how I used to remember it. You cut something complex into simple things. So this is how to classify chemical reactions that occur within living organisms. This marks the end of our video. Hope you have learned something. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Otherwise, happy solving.